I want to start today by putting you in a very specific headspace. Imagine you've been working toward a massive goal for years. I mean, this is the big one.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a huge project launch, a sales target that seemed impossible, or a creative masterpiece you've poured your soul into. You're losing sleep, you're skipping meals, you're running on like pure adrenaline.
Grind. We all know it.
Exactly, the grind. And then, this is the key part, you win. You actually do it. The project is delivered, you hit the number, the crowd goes wild, you're standing on top of the mountain.
The summit.
But then you wake up the next morning, and instead of feeling like a champion, you feel hollow.
Heavy.
Drained, and honestly, you feel like you want to quit everything and just, disappear.
It's the post-success slump. Or, I mean, if you want to be clinical, post-achievement depression.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. It's that moment the adrenaline finally vanishes and you're left with the bill, the cost of it all.
And today, we're going to do a deep dive into what is, well, you could argue it's one of the most famous case studies of this exact crash. But, and here's the twist, we aren't looking at a Harvard Business Review article.
No, we're going way back to 1882. We're looking at a text by the famous Victorian preacher Charles Spurgeon called The Still Small Voice.
Now, I know what you're thinking. A sermon from the 1800s, really? But stick with us, because our mission today is to look at this text as a profound psychological profile. Spurgeon was basically analyzing severe burnout, long before we had the words for it.
That's so true. And what's fascinating is his take on how to handle that crash, and this idea about the difference between noise and actual power is so counterintuitive.
Especially now.
Right, in our world of social media noise and viral moments, this 19th century text is shockingly relevant.
It really is. It's a masterclass in why the loudest voice in the room isn't usually the most powerful one. So let's set the scene. Spurgeon is analyzing the prophet Elijah, and even if you aren't familiar with the backstory, the narrative is basically an action movie.
Oh, it's high drama. See, to get the burnout, you have to understand the peak that came right before it. Elijah has just had the single best day of his life. He's on Mount Carmel.
And he's in a showdown.
A literal showdown with hundreds of prophets of a rival religion, Baal.
It's one guy against hundreds. The odds are impossible.
Exactly. And in the story, he wins decisively. There's fire from the sky, a huge public miracle. The people rally to him. It's a total victory.
So it's like winning the Super Bowl, the election, and the lottery all in one go. He's the man of the hour.
And, psychologically, Elijah expects this to be it, the turning point. He thinks, okay, the corrupt monarchy will fall, the nation will change, my job is done.
He thinks he's fixed the world.
But that's not what happens. And this is the crash. Queen Jezebel doesn't convert. She sends him a death threat. The king, it breaks him. Spurgeon describes him running into the wilderness, collapsing under a tree, and just asking to die. He goes from, I am the champion, to, I am a total failure in like 24 hours.
Which brings us to the first major insight from this, and I have to say, this part is so incredibly practical, it's almost funny. Elijah's having a spiritual crisis, he's depressed, he's suicidal. You'd think the solution would be some grand vision or a lecture.
But it isn't. Spurgeon points out that the very first thing that happens is God puts Elijah to sleep.
Just a nap.
A nap. And then an angel wakes him up, gives him a cake baked on coals and a cruse of water, so a hot meal and a drink, and then lets him go back to sleep. Again.
The cure for his existential despair was literally a snack and a nap.
It sounds funny, but Spurgeon is making a very serious point here about what he calls the corporeal system, the body. He's arguing that we tend to over-spiritualize our misery. We look for these deep philosophical reasons for why we feel awful.
I have the quote here, and the language is just fantastic. He says, people blame the devil or unbelief when the real problem is a torpid liver or a weak stomach.
Exactly. Spurgeon calls the body the house of clay. His whole point is that if the house is broken, if you are physically exhausted, the soul can't soar. You can't think your way out of burnout if your body's just shutting down.
That's such a modern idea, really. You expect a preacher from that era to say, pray more, but he's saying, go get some fresh air and eat something.
He even says that sometimes the physician is as needful as the minister. It's the reminder to check the basics first. Are you slept? Are you fed? Have you seen sunlight recently?
It's the HALT acronym we use today, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
He was all over it. And it's only after Elijah has slept and eaten twice that he's even strong enough to travel to Mount Horeb.
Okay, so let's go there. He's in a cave. And this is where we get to the core imagery of the text. The fireworks versus the whisper.
This is a masterclass in contrast. Elijah is waiting for God to speak. He's waiting for the big answer. And what happens first is just this sequence of terrifying natural events.
It's pure spectacle. First, a wind. And Spurgeon describes it as a hurricane so strong it's literally tearing mountains apart, breaking granite.
Then an earthquake. The ground is shaking under him.
And finally, fire. Lightning, he says, is just leaping from crag to crag. It's all shock and awe.
But then comes the twist. And Spurgeon really hammers this point home. The Lord was not in the wind. The Lord was not in the earthquake. And the Lord was not in the fire.
They were just the warm-up act.
Preliminaries. Heralds, but not the message itself. And then, after all that noise and fury, a dead calm. And out of that calm comes what the Hebrew text calls a voice of gentle silence, or, as we know it, the still small voice.
This is where it gets so interesting psychologically, because Spurgeon notes that Elijah wasn't scared of the storm. He's a child of the storm. He's a rugged guy. He's used to conflict. The wind and the fire didn't make him flinch.
But the silence did.
Right. Why? Why is the whisper more terrifying than the earthquake?
Spurgeon's argument is that the storm couldn't cow Elijah, but the silence thawed his soul. It's the difference between being shouted at and being truly seen. Noise is external. You can brace against noise.
Yeah.
But silence forces you to listen. It turns your focus inward.
That makes perfect sense. It's like in an argument. Someone screams at you, your walls go up. But if they suddenly lower their voice and speak gently...
your defenses just crumble. And this leads us right into what I think is the intellectual core of this whole thing, the paradox of power.
Okay, let's unpack that, because we usually think power is the earthquake. It's the big show of force.
Right. But Spurgeon argues that big displays of force plagues, war, shouting, they usually harden hearts. They don't change them. He uses the biblical Pharaoh as his prime example.
Oh, the plagues of Egypt.
Exactly. I mean, terrible things happened. Rivers of blood, darkness, hail. It was terrifying. But did it change Pharaoh? Did it make him a better person? No. Spurgeon says terror creates resistance. His heart just got harder.
So force can control your behavior, maybe, but it doesn't change who you are.
Correct. And then Spurgeon gives this beautiful metaphor to explain how real change happens. The iceberg.
I loved this visual. Walk us through it.
He says, imagine a massive iceberg. You want to melt it, you can take a hammer to it, a file. You can make a lot of noise chipping away. You're using force, you're sweating. It's a big show.
And it looks like you're doing a lot of work. Ice chips flying everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're just scratching the surface. Then, he says, imagine the soft south wind, the gentle breath of spring. It makes no noise. It doesn't strike a single blow, but it wraps around the ice.
And the iceberg just melts.
The rivulets are set free. The entire state of the thing changes. That, Spurgeon says, is this still small voice. The wind and the fire are the hammer-all noise. The whisper is the warm wind that actually gets to the core.
And he actually turns this into a pretty sharp critique of his own time, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. Remember, this is 1882. He's looking at the world around him, and he sees this reliance on what he calls sensationalism.
He mentions brass bands, tambourines, and banners.
He's criticizing this idea that if you just make enough noise, if you generate enough excitement, you'll change people. He also goes after the hunt for clever men or eloquent preachers.
That really stood out. He says, we look for the earthquake in a speaker, someone who thunders.
Yes. And he says, God is not in the wind. You can have a packed house, you can have people emotionally worked up, but if that quiet internal shift, that thawing of the soul doesn't happen, it's all just theater.
It's amazing how relevant that is. I mean, we live in an economy of the earthquake.
Yeah.
Viral videos, hot takes, outrage. We're obsessed with noise.
And we confuse that noise with influence. We think because something was loud, it must have been effective. Spurgeon is saying the exact opposite. Real change happens in the silence, when no one's even looking.
So let's look at what the voice actually did to Elijah. The storm didn't move him, but the whisper did. What was his response?
His first response was humility. The text says when he heard the voice, he wrapped his face in his mantle.
He hid his face.
He didn't do that for the fire. But this quiet voice produced a sense of shame for his cowardice, a deep reverence. It stripped away all his defenses.
And then came the question. The voice asks him, what doest thou here, Elijah?
Which is such a piercing question. It's not a command, it's an inquiry. Spurgeon calls it a home inquiry. It forces Elijah to stop performing and just be honest.
And he is. He finally just pours out all his frustration. He stops being the man of God and he's just a guy who's tired and angry.
And that's the power of the whisper. It creates a space for truth that the earthquake never could.
But this conversation reveals the next trap Elijah fell into, the trap of isolation.
Yes, this is so key to the burnout story. Elijah tells God, I, even I only, am left.
He genuinely believes he's the last good person on earth.
It's a very common feeling for high performers, isn't it? I'm the only one holding this together. If I stop, it all collapses.
Main character syndrome.
It is. He thought his whole career was a failure because the big event at Carmel didn't fix everything instantly. He was judging success by the earthquake.
But God corrects him.
God reveals the reality. There are 7,000 other people who haven't bowed to Baal. He isn't alone at all.
7,000. That's not a small number. How did he miss them?
Because they were quiet. They weren't calling down fire from the sky. They were just quietly holding the line in their homes, their businesses, their daily lives.
So while he was depressed that the big thing didn't happen, he was missing that thousands of individuals had held on because of his work.
Exactly. Spurgeon says we have to beware of the sanguine planner who has a perfect scheme for how things should go.
The person who says, okay, first the launch, then the sales, then we change the world.
Right. And when the scheme fails, when the earthquake doesn't happen, they despair. But Spurgeon's insight is God works rather by our weakness than by our strength.
There it is again, the weakness of power versus the power of weakness.
Yes. We have to see the strength in people we might dismiss as weak. Spurgeon mentions, like, the poor young brother on the street corner or the teacher of a small class. They're not generating noise, but they are generating heat. They're the south wind.
It's a call to reevaluate who we think the important people are. It might not be the person on the stage, but the person having a quiet conversation in the back row.
And for Elijah, realizing he wasn't alone was part of the cure. He had to learn the mission didn't depend entirely on him.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. We've gone from snacks and naps to the physics of icebergs. What does this all mean for us today?
I think the most immediate takeaway is to reevaluate our own struggles. If you're feeling burned out, if you feel like running to a cave, maybe stop looking for a big intellectual magic bullet.
Eat a sandwich, take a nap.
Seriously, respect the house of clay. But, on a deeper level, it's about adjusting our sensors. We live in a world of deafening noise. We are always looking for the earthquake solution, the big break, the viral hit.
We think if it's not loud, it's not working.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But this story suggests that maybe the most powerful force in the universe is love without display.
Love without display. That's a great phrase.
If you are waiting for a loud sign, a massive event to change your direction, you might just miss the real signal. The solution to your biggest problem, or the comfort you're looking for, might be whispering so quietly that you have to stop everything else to actually hear it.
And that takes intention. You have to step away from the wind and the fire.
You do. You have to wrap your face in the mantle and just listen.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it. A reminder that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is be quiet. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
A pleasure, as always.
We'll see you next time.